you're all having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Portrait Letters podcast number 2359. And today we are talking about how can I find stories when no one is left to tell them? This is a very good question and something I'm having to deal with, excuse me, in my own family tree. Now, my voice has been good all day. I've been drinking lots of water and keeping my voice lubricated. So let's hope we can get through this without the croaky. So the croaky has hopefully gone. But anyway, back to the thing. All right. So when voices are gone, records begin to speak. So this is when you've got to start looking at records. Documents preserve fragments of daily life. So you've got like birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, baptismal records. All of those will speak to those little fragments. So you can start putting the picture together with the facts. What we need is the stories to fill in around those facts. But what do these documents tell you? Well, birth records will tell you where and when they were born. It may have on there the mother's name with her maiden name on there, depending on the time that this was all done as well. So based on the time period you're researching, it could be that the records were kept at the parish level and the only thing that you have a record of their birth is at the parish or the church records. They might record the baptism of the child. And so you've got a rough idea when they were born. But, and I have to caution you here, sometimes children were not baptized until they were 5 or 6 and their whole family went together to the nearest church and had everybody baptized at once. And they could be all different ages. On some of those records, you may find that whoever was doing the filling in the book in the parish, they may have written in the birth date as well. This happened with my second great grandfather. That's how I discovered where he was and what had happened. It filled in a portion of the story because on his record, now when you look at baptismal records or when you look at any records where there's a list of them, always look above and below to see what's there. And the baptismal record that I looked at had his name there, had his birth date, and he was 5 when he was baptized. He was baptized on his 5th birthday. And it had his mother's name there. Then it had a little line that went underneath her name and address, and it had father was past tense. Something had happened to the father. And then had his address there. And I was like, that's really weird. And so I got the other information there. Then I did what I always do. Look above, nothing there. Look below. Oh, the same mother is mentioned here. What's going on? And so I had a look and there was another son being baptized, but it was the half brother to my 3rd great grandfather. And this is from looking below this. And I'm like, okay. And so went along and found her husband's name. So somewhere between when the 1851 census was done in England, and I know that he was on the 1851 census because I already found him and his mother on there. And at the time, she said that she was the wife of a jeweler. And so we knew that everything must have been fine at that point. We just didn't know where he was because on his son's, on my 3rd great grandfather's marriage certificate, it stated that he was a foreign agent. So putting those two pieces together, the foreign agent and the jeweler, putting them together, he was probably my 4th great grandfather may have been one of those guys that would get on the ships, go sailing off to the east, into the Orient, to India or China, Japan, any of those countries around there. There's a beautiful big white dog just gone walking down the street. It's gorgeous. Anyway, I get my fill of dogs around here. But not seen that one before. Beautiful snow white dog, and it's raining, and lots of fur. Anyway, so from that, I could make an educated guess, and it's just a guess at this point. There's a theory that we're going to prove. We're going to have to prove that he may have been on one of those ships that would go to the east, either to India or up into China or Japan, and bring gemstones back from. He may have even gone to Africa and brought gemstones back from them, depending on where they would get the gemstones from in those days, and would bring them back. Now, either he would create the pieces into the jewelry or he would supply a jeweler to create the pieces. That bit we're a little unclear of, but we've got that he was a jeweler in 1851 census. And on his son's marriage certificate a few years later, we've got that he was a foreign agent. So that's where I've put those two together. So something must have happened to him to have put on his son's baptismal record that he was from this place in Essex. So that creates a mystery there. We're still trying to figure this out, and we figured out the third great grandfather back in 2004, 2005, and since then we've been trying to find the fourth great grandfather. But he has a very common name. He may as well be John Smith, honestly. He's William Price, and yes, he's very difficult to find. But anyway, so we've gathered that from so something happened to him somewhere along the way, because we found the marriage certificate for his mother and his stepfather, and on her one it said that she was a widow. On their marriage certificate, it had her as a widow, and he was a bookbinder, which then explained why my third great grandfather did not become a jeweler but became a bookbinder. Because we're like, well, where does the bookbinder thing come in? Now we know. We've filled in that piece of information. So finding vital records, which are marriage certificates, death certificates, birth certificates, baptismal records. And in those days, they didn't fill out birth certificates. They didn't have them back in the 1850s in England. Everything was kept at the parish level. And so you've got to have a look at what time are you looking at, and when was it brought into the country or into the state, especially in the states, because different states did this at different times. And even the federal level demanded at one point in the US, when was it deemed that all records had to be kept at the county level or the city level or whatever level they're now kept at? And when do they have to register? When do they have to start registering births and things like that, and marriages and deaths like that? Because in those days, everything was put into the books at the local churches. All the births were recorded as baptism when they were baptized. The marriages were most of the time they had banns, which were read for, I think it's like weekly for 3 weeks prior to the wedding date. The marriage, of course, was recorded at the church and signed by the bride and the groom and the witnesses. Which then gives you another clue, because when you're looking at marriage certificates, it would have on there the groom's name, his age, or it may say of age, and that meant that they were over the age where they did no longer require parental consent. Now, in some places, 18 was the age for girls at which they stopped having to have parental. Up until the age of 18, they had to have parental consent. With the guys, it was up until the age of 21 in some places. Older than that, they had to be 21 or older to not require parental consent to get married. Now, on their marriage records, there may be, now depending on where you are and what they recorded at the time, some places recorded more than others, some just recorded the basics. There may be the father's name on there and his occupation. In some rare cases back in the 1800s, you will also find the mother's name with her maiden name there as well, depending on where they're from. And then you look at the witnesses. Who signed these documents? Who were the witnesses to the marriage? Were they family, or were they friends? So that's another piece of research there for you. Another clues on the death information. These have changed over time as to what information is given. Usually it would have the name of the person, the date they died, the name of the person who died, what their occupation was, and that may have been it. On some, you might find when and where they were born. Later years, it started bringing in who were the parents, who was the father, who was the mother. And this way you could get clues into who the parents were. And sometimes they would include the mother's maiden name. Sometimes they wouldn't. These days, they now ask for that information. And you have to remember that at that point, anybody could give the information for the death certificate. So you have to look to see who provided the information. And sometimes it will say how they were related to the person that died. I remember having to do this for Brad's, when Brad passed, having to go in and give all the information for the death certificate. Thankfully, I knew all the information that had to go on there, and if not, I could pick up my phone really quick and pull up Ancestry on my phone and give them any dates I was missing. And then it would have the cause of death would be on there as well, and the doctor who certified them dead. And on the cause of death, it would have how long they had that ailment or that that particular issue that they were having with that caused them to die. So these documents give you fragments of their life that can help you. You can also look in family Bibles will have information in there as well. Census records reveal the movement and the relationships. Now, here is a thing to watch with the relationships. There is going to be some presumptions in here because it will have the head of the house, and then everybody listed underneath that head of the house is how are they related to the head of the house. Listen to that. How are they related to the head of the house? Now, you may have the husband there. His wife would be usually on the next line down, and it would have wife, because she's the wife of the thing. And then it would have his children listed. But here is a good question for you. Are the children listed actually belong to the wife? So yes, they belong to the father, they belong to the husband, because it says that their relationship to the head of the house, which is the husband, is, sons and daughters and all of that. But people presume that because there is a wife mentioned, that they are her children as well. Not in all cases. Not in all cases. There are times that a husband has gotten married again and the children listed, maybe the children from his first marriage. And if there's a newborn baby, that could be a baby born into the new marriage with the second wife. So you have to watch things like that. Don't presume because they are listed and grouped together all nicely on a census report that is father, mother, and their children. It is definitely his children, or if in the case where a woman is listed as the head of the house, they are her children, because it will have how are they related to her if she is the head of the house. So you have to, a lot of people presume just because there's a husband and wife that all the children listed are their children. By the description, it will say that the relationship to the head of the house, but not to the relationship to the wife. So think about that. And if the woman happens to be the head of the house, then they will be her sons and daughters. So it's very interesting watching that. It wasn't until I went to one of the classes that I went on genealogy that I suddenly realized, oh yeah, we've always presumed that there's the husband, there's the wife, and here's their children. Not always the case. So census reports will reveal movement and relationships. You may have the mother-in-law visiting, which is really cool because now you have the maiden name of the wife if you haven't had the maiden name of the wife. But is that her first marriage or second marriage for her name? But it gives you another clue. You're always finding these clues. And these are all part of the story. Newspapers. Oh my gosh, I love the newspapers. They were like gossip magazines. Oh my gosh. You want to know how gossip got started? Blame the media. In print. I'm talking about gossip in print. If you go back to some of the newspapers from the 1800s, even into the early 1900s, it will have things like Mr. and Mrs. John Smith arrived home today after a 2-week visit with their daughter in such and such a place where they spent a relaxing time with their daughter and her family. And they will have the daughter's name there. Or it could be Mr. and Mrs. John Smith just left today to go on vacation to visit their daughter in whatever town they're going to go, state and town they're going to go visit. And they will be gone for 2 weeks. You've just advertised to the entire world in this newspaper that read this newspaper, or to the entire reading area of this newspaper, that Mr. and Mrs. Smith have left their home for 2 weeks. Their house is now empty for 2 weeks. This continued up into like the 1930s, 1940s, that these type of reports will be there. Mr. Joe Brown was admitted to hospital today with a broken arm. He is expected to be there for a week, when he will then be discharged and returned to his home at blah, 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 blah address. They always included the address. If somebody was leaving on vacation, they're going to go visit their daughter in such and such a town, state, and here's her address. Oh, they've just returned home to their address after visiting for 2 weeks with their. It was amazing to see, and this was in the society pages of who'd gone on vacation, who hadn't, and I was sort of like, this is interesting. Then you would have like the pre-wedding stuff, like the engagement announcements would be in there. Again, a great source of information to go in there to help fill out the story. Some weddings would then be reported in the newspaper. So now you have another piece of the puzzle that looks into these ancestors' lives. It could have that they got who was getting married, where they got married, where and when they got married. But not only that, they describe her dress. They give you details about her dress. They give you details about who the maid of honor is, or the matron of honor is, and what dresses they were wearing and what the bridesmaids were wearing, if there was any flower girls. Then they look at the groom and what he was wearing and who his best man was and who his groomsmen were. They're all listed there. And it will tell you if they are brother of the bride, sister of the bride, brother of the groom, sister of the groom, that sort of thing. It puts it all in there for you. It's like a gold mine. If you can get a wedding story, it's a gold mine of information. But now you're starting to get a fuller picture of the family. And then it will turn around and say where and when they had their wedding breakfast or wedding reception. And they may list all of the guests who were there, and they'll have like under a family thing, on the bride's side of the family, there was her aunt and her uncle and their cousins, and this is their names. And then there was this sibling and their family, and this is their names, and it will have everybody. And then these are the people who are friends of the family or of the couple, and will have all their names listed. And these were friends of the bride's parents, friends of the groom's parents. I tell you, some of these things are like take up a big space on a page, but they're a gold mine of information. This is why I love newspapers. I have a love-hate relationship with them. Then when somebody dies, there are obituaries in there. And their obituary, sometimes they're just a little small piece. Other times, it's a story. It gives you their entire life in there, like who their parents were, where and when they were born, where and when they met their spouse, and if the spouse is still alive. They may include the spouse's maiden name as well. Then they list all the children that they've had. And when they sometimes when they list the children, they might put John and Susan. And that means that John was the child, Susan is his wife. Or they may put in parentheses the name of the spouse. They might have John parentheses Susan, which meant that Susan is the wife of John. There's a whole code in reading obituaries. And then it might list all of their grandchildren. And then it might say that, predeceased, was it something about those that had gone before the deceased person? Well, it might have been their parents, it might have been siblings. They'll name siblings, they'll name children that have predeceased the person, and then they'll have like a survived by, and this is all the family that's still alive. And then sometimes in there they will have a story of their life, will walk you through their life, where they went to school, if they went to college, what degrees they graduated with, when they graduated, when they met their spouse, when they got married, the children that they have, the places they have lived, any societies or clubs or organizations that they were involved with may be listed there as well. This gives you a lot of padding to go into that story. So don't go, newspapers here. Go and investigate, and then if they appear in the newspaper for some particular reason, in an article, you have another piece of their story. So don't disregard and say, well, I've got these facts. Yeah, but what information was on the stuff where you got the facts from? Keep your sources too. Sources are huge, and because if somebody comes along and looks at your tree and you've got no sources, they're like, well, how can I verify this information? How can I find this information so I can see the record? Because if I'm looking at a client's tree, I'm looking at their sources and seeing where they got the information from. And it might lead me to, oh, they don't have information from this. Maybe we could find some information over here. So always look at those sources and everything else. If there's community history, if you go to the library, there's always there's a section where there'll be books based on people that have founded the area. There'll be historical books there that will have stories about the area, about when it first started. It will have the history of the area, along with people who were key into that. Are any of your ancestors in those books as well? But the community history fills emotional gaps. When you see that they were involved with helping found a town, or they were the founders of a particular society that was based in that town, you can find all these details, and then you go to those societies and those organizations and look at their historical documents, and you might find your ancestors in there, like when they became a member. Were they just a member? Did they hold any offices within that organization? You can find out all of this. And just remember, the small details rebuild full lives. As you're looking through this information, you're picking up pieces here and there, which is starting to fill in these stories. Look around and see if there's like a historical society for your area, and maybe go in there. They may have journals. That might have been written by your ancestors that are being preserved there at the historical society. You never know where you're going to find information. Just don't look at it. Don't look at, oh, well, they only lived in the town for 20 years. Go find out anyway, because in that 20 years, they could have had a lot of impact on that community. Church records, great source as well. Even clubs and societies with AGM notes for their annual general meeting. Who was there? Was your ancestor there? Did they say anything? Did they vote on anything? These are all the small details that can help rebuild these lives that you're trying to put together, because the people who knew the story are no longer with us. And this all matters because family history does not end when memories are gone. We have ways that we may not be able to get the full story, but we can get a good portion of that story to give you an insight into who this person was and how they lived. The other good thing about historical societies is that they will talk about the area as it was in the time your ancestors lived there. Because we know that places change over time. We know that that happens. So just remember to that family, that the historical societies within your communities and stuff are a great source of a great resource, because they can tell you what times were like back when your ancestors lived there and give you another insight into how they lived. So your practical takeaway for today is use records to reconstruct lives, not just timelines. So as you're going through these records and putting in the facts, what other details are on those records that could help find out more about who that person is? Does it have, if it's a birth record, does it have the father's occupation on there? Or the baptismal record, does it have the father's occupation on there? Is that the same occupation that your ancestor took up? Because usually if somebody was a farmer, the farming would continue down through the line. It was just the way things were done then, which is why it confused me a little bit when I saw that when I learned that my fourth great grandfather was a foreign spy, a foreign agent. I suddenly went to James Bond. I had a great grandfather who was a spy. No wonder I love mysteries so much. And then when I found the 1851 census when he was a jeweler, I was like, oh, but still, that's really cool. He wasn't a spy, but he could have been somebody who went and bought the jewelry and stuff. Back in the 1800s, going on these ships and stuff, he could have been drowned at sea. We don't know. I'm still trying to figure out find the information for him. His first name was William. His last name was Price. It's like looking for John Smith. And his wife's name was Elizabeth. Do you know how many William Prices were married to an Elizabeth in the 1800s? There were a lot. Yeah. And I could have, and because of his common name, finding him it's hard to find him on the 1841 census. And I'm trying to find him on the 1851 census. On the 1851 census, I can find her with their son, my third great grandfather, and she's listed down there as the wife of a jeweler. And that's when I realized that the foreign agent wasn't actually a spy, it was a jeweler. Oh, well, maybe I have a secret spy somewhere in the family. Who knows? But by doing this, by finding these records and reconstructing the lives, not just the timelines, but their lives as well, you can find some really cool surprises in there, and you can find out maybe some brave stuff. Did they serve in the military? Can you get a hold of their military records? Military records will tell you a lot about their time in service, where they saw war, where they saw battles and stuff. And then you can go to the different places where those battles took places, and they might have like a visitors center or a historical record center there where you can go in and you can walk in and you can say, hey, my great-grandmother, this is the records here. It shows me that he was here fighting. Can you tell me about the battle that took place here? And they would be more than happy. Maybe they can give you some insight into the person. Maybe they even have some records with your ancestors' names on them. Who knows? Unless you go and you ask, you're not going to know. So your practical takeaway, use records to reconstruct lives, not just the timelines. And if you want help rebuilding family stories, just send us a private message and we'll be more than happy to give you some tips and tricks and things like that. And in closing, stories do not disappear. They scatter. And all we're doing is just going and picking up the pieces and putting them back together. We will never have the puzzle complete, but we can give it a damn good go of getting that puzzle as complete as we possibly can while we're around. And that then leaves that for the next person who takes up the genealogy flag for the family to go and see if they can find pieces that fill in the gaps and things like that. But it gives them a place to start instead of having to start over from scratch. That is your legacy that you're leaving, is a copy of your family tree with as much detail on there as possible. And with that, I am out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we will catch you guys back here, tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time.